Hello, class, and welcome to our video lecture slash response, if you would, to 5A, 5D, 5G, and a further discussion of Essay 3. Remember, Essay 3 is an extended definition essay, going beyond the dictionary definition of your term. We all agree on what the dictionary definition is. What's abstract about it is the aspect that we don't agree on. Now, first essay, telling the brutal truth. Torture. Torture is one of our abstract terms on the list, right? It seems to me like waterboarding is torture. And if you notice, waterboarding it kind of almost sounds like a sport, right? Like, yeah, let's go waterboarding, right? But the interrogation technique is considered enhanced. These words that qualify nouns that come before them, usually the adjective, right, is what extends the definitions. It's not interrogation, it's enhanced interrogation. So it's not torture, it's a euphemism, right? Because as we know, connotation are the emotional associations, denotation is the dictionary definition, and a politer or less specific way, less harsh way of saying something, right? Euphemism. So as we can see here, harsh, enhanced, brutal, right? So it goes from enhanced, then it goes to harsh, then it goes to brutal, because we read about the ladders of meanings and obfuscation. And I think enhanced kind of covers up exactly what it is. Harsh, I agree with the author, is kind of like what you'd say to a child. You'd be harsh with them. And then I think brutal gets into the physicality of the act, and it is simulated drowning, right? On the editorial page, they long ago added up to torture. So many think brutal is just a. So number one, right? What is the progression? Describe the linguistic shift. Enhanced to harsh to brutal to torture, right? Number two, right? The question about objective versus subjective journalism. Editorials, letters to the editors, uh, op-ed, those are all about subjective. Those are all about the editor's feelings. Whereas when they're writing about the news, they're supposed to report just the facts. And no more in our time has the whole idea of fake news calling facts more into question. And you have that whole reading in the book about the importance of facts. So hopefully everybody recognizes that linguistic shift. Hopefully everybody recognizes the difference between objective journalism, right? He said, in the spirit of objective journalism, the Times should have dropped all adjectives. Interesting point. Question number three, many people think brutal is just a euphemism for torture. And then question number four, Deborah Tannen makes a really good point. She said, the search for words that are not in any way evaluative is hopeless. All words have connotations. And that is something to keep in mind for essay number three. Go beyond the dictionary definition, right? As the bullet points on page 118 suggest that you do. Extend the definition so that you can take the aspect of it that's abstract. Use literary fiction as the evidence, characters, their motives, their development, right? Decision-making process, their actions. Why do they do what they do? How can you better understand identity, better understand a psychological addiction, better understand courage, better understand heroism? So this tries to better redefine what torture is and counter argument. It's a dialectical argument saying this is what the United States says is enhanced interrogation, and they're saying it's not torture. That's just a euphemism for torture. This is torture, and they use the specific prisoners and their treatment as their examples. Now, those are nonfiction examples. We need to make sure that we're using fictional examples. Now, you can compare and contrast fictional examples with real life examples. Make sure your essay is grounded in fiction. Make sure your thesis statement lets the reader know which fictional sources or characters you're going to focus on. Make sure your support includes the elements of fiction, poetry, and plays. Make sure your body paragraphs use those as the structure, guiding structure. In some ways, you have a lot of freedom in the bodies and the developments, but you got to make sure that the elements of fiction and fiction is the focal point to prove your point about your abstract term. Now, the 3 essays in the book you did exercises on, they all are extended definitions, but they all deal with nonfiction characters, right? The Miss G internet addiction, right, takes a negative term like addiction and actually extends the definition so that the connotation can include someone who's passionate. And it's interesting. Is passion just a euphemism for addiction? If somebody drinks a lot of wine, they're a wine connoisseur. If somebody drinks a lot of beer, are they drunk? I'm just saying. And I drink a lot of beer, so I'm not talking smack on people that drink beer. With that being said, the Miss G essay, right, goes beyond just the dictionary definition and looks at how an addiction, in some ways, could be more better described as a passion, if you would. Um, if we go to the questions, what does Heffernan mean when she says this kind of internet use isn't usefully described as an addiction? Well, if you look in the penultimate paragraph, the second to last paragraph, this kind of internet use isn't usefully described as an addiction. I'm in paragraph 16, even if there's some shirking of chores and insomnia to it. Fantasy life and real life should ideally be brought into balance, but no student who's making decent grades needs to get off the internet just because it would look more respectable or comprehensible to be playing chess, throwing a frisbee, or reading a George Orwell paperback. The internet, as Gabriella uses it, simply is intellectual life and play. Right? She's just the person I'd want for a student, in fact, or a friend or a daughter. Final paragraph, she repeats her point, she reviews her support, and she reflects on the prompt. It's no accident that search, and she puts search in quotes because she means the word itself, is the dominant metaphor on the internet, and it's no accident that the internet attracts a certain kind of young, dreamy mind at some liberty to find itself, the type that in earlier eras might have been drawn to novels or movies. As Binks Boyling puts it in The Moviegoer, what is the nature of the search, you ask? Really, it's very simple, or at least for a fellow like me. The search is what anyone would undertake if he were not sunk in the everydayness of his own life. I thought all of you were quite frank, sharing how much time you spend searching. I spend a good amount of time searching, sometimes for work, sometimes for pleasure. So I definitely think that the survey, and if you Google that internet addiction survey um, by Dr. Young, Google Dr. Young internet addiction, I found myself answering yes to many of those questions too. So one has to consider milieu, right? Cultural surroundings when taking into account that survey. So as I'm turning the pages, right, that brings us to 117 and 118. Hopefully everybody is clear. Make sure you use these bullet points on 118 at the top of the page, right? Focus on this. Use the guide on 117 and 118 to help you organize your essay based on what? Comparison, analogies, Rogerian strategy, recognizing the opposition, the counterargument, and meeting in the middle, making concessions before you refute, using dialectical thinking, using Occam's razor, avoiding hidden assumptions, looking at connotations, looking at denotations, focusing on your examples in literature, going beyond the dictionary definition. The bullet points on 118 are very helpful. And we're at 9 minutes and 30 seconds on the video here, so I need to wrap it up and keep it somewhat manageable. Got quite a few videos to watch this week, and hopefully they're helpful. So, the next essay, SLUT, right? Essentially, and I believe, did I leave out 5A? Oh, I'm sorry, I left out 5A. The voice you hear when you read silently before we get to SLUT, right? He was talking about your speaking out loud voice, but it's in your head. So what is he doing? He's doing an extended definition of the word voice, to go beyond just what you vocally express, metaphorically what you hear in your head. And I touched on that in the essay three, writing logically, thinking critically lecture. But hopefully everybody feels good about 5A, 5D, and 5G. Um, so SLUT, right? She takes a term that has been derogatory as far as I know, and she kind of extends the definition and says, in some ways, from a dialectical perspective, using Rogerian strategy, looking at hidden assumptions, she extends it to say that it's actually becoming, right, a term to extend to voracious behavior of all kinds. Um, it's could become a fun word to say, um, and things of that nature. But then she re- looks at rebuttal and counters that argument by then bringing in various perspectives in paragraphs 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is the deal. For those of you that might be writing on identity, looking at milieus with relation to female characters and promiscuity and expectations. I mean, look at Ophelia, right? From Hamlet and Laertes and Polonius, she gets, differing perspectives on things. I mean, Hamlet, frailty, thy name is woman. Wise men know what monsters you make of them. Um, there's a lot of talk about women being deceptive and female promiscuity being negative and things of that nature. So if you're writing about female identity, you might use the SASLUT as something, right? I find it hard to say it. It's kind of like the B word, right? Is it easier for one female to call another female a derogatory female term, just like is it the same thing with cultural terms that are derogatory, racial terms that are derogatory? Is it not what you say, but how you say it? I mean, these are all questions that are surrounding the inferences that we make when people say words. And those inferences are based on facts, they're based on ethos, logos, pathos, things of that nature. So it's all kind of coming together with this class. Um, Lastly, let me just say, female identity, looking at the idea of promiscuity, looking at the idea of women and what their gender roles were and their expectations that came along with those. So I think you could definitely use this essay, and I think, and more on this in my Macbeth lecture videos, right, as we finish up that play. But I mean, when you think about that play, you look at Ophelia, right, as someone, she's a true victim, right? She, in some ways, disobeys, right? If she slept with Hamlet, what if she's pregnant? Right? Her father's dead. Who's going to take care of her? What are her options in life? I mean, there's a lot going on, and Shakespeare does a really nice job of getting in the mind of a young girl, um, and especially giving us insight into what the milieu would have been at that time. Then you look at somebody like Gertrude. Was it a power move to marry Claudius? Um, does she really love him? Are feelings genuine? Bottom line is, the only time she doesn't obey him, um, she dies when she drinks the cup at the end. And that brings us to Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who, boy, oh boy, is she an interesting character. And, there's a lot of LGBTQIA things going on when she unsexes herself. You've got the witches who seem to be intersexed. Um, why does she need to remove her femininity to have that power, to have that influence? So there's a lot going on with female identity, and I think that this essay might be something that you could use as a source in essay three. So hopefully everybody's feeling good. Um, when you send me your intro and your précis, you should get some feedback from me. And, hopefully we're feeling confident as we're moving forward to constructing the draft of this essay. Make sure that you make literature the focus. Make sure that you quote from each of your secondary sources. Make sure it's 5 full pages with 4 secondary sources. That does not include the fiction. Those are the articles you do your précis on. The fiction, Hamlet, Macbeth, that's what you write the paper on. So although you put the fiction in your works cited, they're not secondary sources. They're primary sources. Now remember, there's no limit. You can use as many sources as possible. Right? It can be more than 5 pages. And remember, when you're getting your dictionary citations, I like dictionary.com If you look at the ladder of abstraction, if you would, or just kind of the specificity of dictionaries, Google's definitions are very simplistic in general, whereas dictionary.com is kind of a step up. Then you've got MW.com, Merriam-Webster. And then last but certainly not least, you've got the Oxford English Dictionary as the fourth bullet on page 118 tells you to consult. Go to the O in the library's database system, and the college subscribes to the Oxford English Dictionary. You can click on that, and boy, oh boy, is it an extensive source. This is the deal. You should include dictionary definition or definition somewhere in your essay, but you wouldn't do a précis on them, would you? So don't count the dictionary definition as one of your four secondary sources. Remember, it's the sources that you do the précis on. The articles, which you hopefully get from the database, from the author's homepage, or from reputable literary sources that you feel can help you to contribute to your argument by either supporting it or being part of your dialectical reasoning as counterargument. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for watching. Remember, call or text or message if you have any questions as you're working forward, moving forward with this essay. More to come. Stay tuned.